Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 3. Now let's start the fanfic. In hindsight, their return trip was surprisingly peaceful, considering all Naruto and company had gone through. After the chaos ensued the town square, it was quietly decided that it would best serve the interests of both parties if Konoha signed the treaty and departed, post-haste. A tactical retreat to avoid further casualties, the Suna Council had called it. The cage had been less subtle. Hiro's corpse was still cooling, the ink still drying on the dotted line, and already Sasori had been chosen as the man's give successor. Now that he'd gotten what he wanted, he was all too eager to see the back of them. 2 kunoichi would be given to the leaf as per the terms of the treaty, and in return the larger village would honor its ties with sand for all time. Kind words were spoken and promises given, but they left Naruto feeling soiled inside nonetheless. And how could they not? Orochimaru, of all people, had been the one to talk him into formally accepting the terms, since the cage refused to honor their peace in any other suit. He was loath to admit it, but the slippery snake had a point. Sometimes you had to put aside what you wanted for the sake of the greater good. Jiraiya of course had been all for it, of course. Some things never changed. Tsunade was oddly morose about it, though. Pakura had been silent as the grave ever since they'd left the gates. In contrast, Karura seemed almost grateful for the Sandame's decree. Despite the fact that the man had none too subtly berated her for even being kidnapped in the first place, she had been called weak, worthless, and not fitting to be a kunoichi. Of course she was grateful to be gone. Not that Naruto blamed her. Gaara's mother struck him as the gentle sort, and her unease in the presence of her own cage spoke volumes for the girl's character. She was a gentle soul, couldn't hurt a fly if she tried. Relatively speaking. Itai. Sorry. Karura whispered contritely as she continued to trim his hair. Did I get you? A little. Yeah. Ow. Careful. Girl. Gomen. Naruto yelped as the scissors missed his hair and accidentally nipped a chunk out of his ear. His cry was met by muffled snorts of laughter from the others, mounted once more upon the mighty Manda's head, the large snake ferrying them across the desert twice in less than 2 days. With no sandstorm or shinobi to deter them, their odd little group was making surprising progress. Naruto, finally making the opportunity, had decided to cut his hair. The long locks have been singed during the suicide bomber's last blast. Long locks were useful for shinobi like Jiraiya, who hardened their hair into spikes and flailed it around, but Naruto saw it as more of an impediment than anything else. The last thing he wanted was someone grabbing a handful of it again as they had during the ambush. So he was getting a trim, courtesy of Karura. He was keeping them bangs in a good portion of it though, couldn't ditch the resemblance entirely. Perhaps you should let me try, Naruto-sama. Pakura asked, the ghost of a smile flitting across her face. Granted, it was a pale imitation of the real thing, but nevertheless her very first display of outward emotion since they'd left Suna behind them. She'd clung to him like a second shadow since the explosion, though thankfully she hadn't been untoward in her displays of devotion since their kiss. If it could even be called such. More and more Uchiha Uzumaki, Naruto found himself surrounded by beautiful women with no idea what to do with them. Oh, he knew what he could do, but his chivalry held that urge firmly in check. Somewhat. Kinda. Sort of. Oh, who the hell was he kidding? He'd wanted to screw Pakura silly for at least an hour how, and it didn't help that she kept brushing up against him. Ahaha, maybe that would be for the best. Very well. But when the older kunoichi tried to claim the scissors, Karura clutched them to her chest. Was I really that bad? One look from the poor Chunin made Naruto think he'd just killed her puppy or something. Gah, not the puppy eyes no jutsu, the bane of man's existence everywhere. Did all women know that technique? Not even he could last more than 5 seconds under that stare. Perhaps he was simply too chivalrous, because he folded like wet tissue paper. Let her do it. Naruto almost groaned, pitying the way his poor head was going to look after this. Karura's smile made up for that, if only a fraction. Gods, what was he going to go with her? Tsunade shook her head to that effect, completely unaware of the conflict roiling within the young man's skull. You big baby. You can fling fireballs until you're out of breath, but when she tries to cut your hair. Not my fault, alright. I never liked getting my hair cut. Besides, I'm ticklish. Not a lie. His neck had always been very sensitive. Sakura had enjoyed tormenting him there during their brief relationship. Ouch. There it was again, that dull ache reminding him of the one woman he'd failed to save. The only woman. He might have moved on in this day and age, but a part of her would always be with him. A hand on his shoulder, urging his feet onward, reminding him why he was doing this. Never again, he would tell himself whenever he saw someone in need, be they kunoichi or shinobi, someone whose life he would save from the misfortune that had befallen them in this time. Never, ever again. He knew he couldn't save everyone, but he'd be damned if he didn't try to save someone. So that's why he's never cut it. Orochimaru mused. Kid, Jiraiya grumbled at that one, I don't whether to be jealous or just pity you. Leave him be, Jiraiya. The paler of the pair was quick to admonish his comrade for the slip. I, for one, see the advantage of having two foreign kunoichi under our roof. It will strengthen ties with the village. Naruto would have shook his head in amazement had he not been writhing in discomfort. Orochimaru backing him up. Was the world coming to an end? Still though, that was one way to think of it. If said kunoichi hadn't already fallen head over heels for him. A tick mark appeared over the blonde's forehead. Ticklish, Oh. Karura-chan. She began sweetly. Naruto froze, instantly on guard whenever she used that tone of voice. Hi, can I borrow those for a second? The Uchiha bristled the moment she handed them over, Sharingan flaring. Oi, don't you dare. Wah, afraid off a little snip. Tsunade edged closer, clearly enjoying his discomfort. Naruto's gaze snapped to Pakura and Karura, seeking aid. But the two kunoichi were smiling, silently bemused that their savior was so terrified by the prospect of the scissor-wielding woman. Jiraiya and Orochimaru weren't of any help either. Both men seemed content to observe his mad scramble to safety, skittering backward like a drunken crab in a desperate attempt to escape the blonde. I'm warning you. Seem now, I'm not gonna hurt you, much. Gah, lemme go, woman. Enjoy the haircut, Yaki. Jiraiya snickered. Naruto yelped as Tsunade tightened her hold of him and mercilessly descended with the scissors. No. One haphazard haircut later. Are you still sulking about that? Quote. Come on kid, are you really going to give me the silent treatment? Ah, leave him be. Jiraiya muttered, quietly poking at the fire with a stick. He'll open up when he's good and ready. Unfortunately Tsunade seemed to think good and ready meant good and now, because she refused to let the matter drop. If there was one thing she loathed above all else, it was being ignored. And the Uchiha was doing just that, stubbornly resisting all attempts to coax him out of his self-inflicted depression. Not that he could be blamed, of course, after the horrendous haircut she'd given him. Come on, damn it, talk to me, lemme be. Naruto's voice resounded in kind, spoken as though from a great distance. Ya hacked a huge chunk out of it. Crazy woman, what was that? You did mess up his hair pretty badly. Orochimaru pointed out drolly. But, I'm never giving you scissors again. Karura shook her head in mock disbelief. To think someone could be so poor at cutting hair. That's not. Should've let me do it. Added Pakura. Poor Tsunade. She recoiled as though she'd been stung. Why are you ganging up on me? Naruto folded both arms across his chest and refused to answer the laughter that followed that statement. And even if he had deigned to speak, he probably wouldn't have been able to make himself heard over the howling winds anyways. A storm had swept up out nowhere from the wastes, battering them with great gales and even greater gouts of sands. With night fast approaching and temperatures plummeting, their little group had been forced to seek shelter in the first. It would have been slow going indeed if they hadn't found this cave. Pakura had been the one to point it out, the Jonin's skill the sole reason they weren't out in the cold at this very moment. It was also the reason why Naruto had gone to the back of said cave, to be alone. He wasn't at all fond of what Tsunade had done to his hair. He'd get over it eventually, but, for now, he wanted nothing to do with scissors or Tsunade. He wanted to sulk, and not even Karura could jostle him out of it. He'd walked as far as his legs would carry him, and here he sat, until her voice finally stopped pestering him. Grungle. The former blonde blanched as his gut grumbled in protest. It wanted food, damn it. Even then, he willed himself not to move, waiting until he was certain the others had fallen asleep. His stomach growled again at this, rumbling in angry betrayal. He couldn't very well last the night without some sort of sustenance now, could he? With that in mind, he started to rise, intent on filching. That was when his foot caught on something, sending him stumbling into a wall. Ouch. What in the world? Frowning, he bent to inspect it. Black eyes bulged. CCC corpse. For it was indeed just that, a mummified man. His skin stretched taut over dead bones, eyes long wince withered and gone, his face frozen in his last moments. Whatever had killed him, it must have been agonizing to produce an expression like that. But what was this? Just leave the herby and get some food. His darker half grumbled. I'm starving here, man. But Naruto was intrigued. The dead man bore a Hishiate of Kumogakure, his emaciated body suggesting he'd been here a good long while. A few decades, at least, if this withered husk was any indication. More or less of a precaution, he chose to frisk the man, see if he had any supplies on him. One had to be practical during war, after all. He'd been expecting kunai, shuriken, year-old supplies gone bad. What he got was a large, onyx-colored roll of parchment bound to the man's back. Naruto studied the scroll for a long moment, quietly marveling at what he had found. It was indeed a large scroll, almost as large as the toad summoning scroll Jiraiya had once shown him. That, or some kind of scroll meant to store items. Surely this couldn't be such a thing, could it? No, this looked more like a aha. Breaking the seal that bound it, his suspicions were confirmed. A summoning contract. But not just any mere contract. This was contract by which he could summon a beast as legendary as it was mythical. Dragons. He felt his fingers tremble at the thought, and fought the urge to put it back. He wasn't aware such a pact had existed, and indeed if it had most likely been lost in this cavern to the ages. No one had stumbled upon an old corpse in this time, no one had thought to search through his belongings. No one knew of this. No one, except him. Holy shit. Yami was practically bouncing with glee inside his head. This is great. No, this is beyond great. Oi, do you have any idea what we could do with this? We'll have the village kissing our feet. Naruto said nothing to that idea, instead resolving himself to inspect the scroll more closely. If something is too good to be true, it often is. But despite his reservation and an exhaustive inspection, this scroll was every bit as legitimate as it seemed. Detailed within this worn parchment were a series of signatures, their names too worn to even partially decipher. This scroll wasn't just old. It was ancient. Whomever this man had been, he must have been of a rare breed indeed. The things this man must have seen. Stop dawdling and sign it. God, you don't have to shout. Nipping a thumb, he carefully wrote his name in blood. Uchiha Naruto. He have expected the scroll to reject him outright for using a fail name, but it accepted him without complaint, his signature appearing at the end of that long and lengthy list. His thumb healed almost immediately. It seemed such a small wound wasn't beyond the Kyuubi's impaired ability reserved to heal. Despite his own curiosity, however, trying to summon such a beast in this enclosed space was nothing short of foolish. He'd wait until later to attempt such a feat. Closing it, he opened a storage scroll and sealed it away. Wouldn't do to have his friends learn of his new discovery before he'd master it now, would it? Whomever this man was, whomever he had been, he clearly didn't have a use for it anymore. That didn't make him feel any less of a grave robber, although Kumo and Iwa might be enemies of Konoha in this war, but they'd also been their allies in the last. And here he was, picking a corpse apart. So much for nobility. What have you got there? Jesus mother. Naruto nearly started out of his skin as Pakura's voice into his ear. She seemed materialize from the gloom like a ghost. One moment she wasn't there and the next she was, cradling a swirling sphere of pale fire in the palm of her hand. Despite himself, the Uchiha actually gulped. Damn thing was downright eerie. Her pale skin seemed to shimmer in the dim light, her hazel eyes dancing with the crimson color of her flames. The silence seemed to stretch unto eternity between the two of them, an awkward tension broken only by the sound of their breathing. Finally, someone broke it. Scorch release. The kunoichi explained at his questioning glare, ruefully indicating the crimson orb with a jerk of the head. Just call me a glorified human flashlight. She fell silent after that one, pointedly eyeing the spot beside him in an unspoken inquiry. Can I sit? Her gaze seemed to ask. Reluctantly Naruto slid back, acquiescing to her quiet question. She settled in neatly beside him, her shoulder brushing his. For a heartbeat they remained like that, nuzzling in silence. The others are sound asleep. Naruto asked at last. Why aren't you? Pakura snorted. It was a very unladly-like sound. Your friend, Jiraiya. She arched a delicate eyebrow, teasingly. He snores. Loudly. Ah. Naruto remembered that from his training days with Ero Sennin, it was enough to make him snicker. Glad to see you finally came out of your shell. Indeed, her last two remarks had surprised him. She was being a great deal more informal with him. He liked that. Didn't want people treating him like royalty because of his name. More than anything, he wanted to be treated as a regular shinobi, albeit an extraordinarily powerful one. One who now has the legendary dragon contract. Yami popped into existence on his shoulder. Oh, the havoc we will wreak with that. Naruto quietly quashed the little devil and returned his attention to Pakura. So, why the sudden change of heart? I've done some thinking. She shrugged. When my case cage told me I was to go with you, I thought of it as a curse, at first. You callin' me ugly, sweetheart? He quirked an eyebrow. No, no, no. Pakura shot to her feet as though she'd been burned. 1,000 pardons, Naruto dono. Relax, I was just joking. He took her wrist and tugged her back down. Lighten up. You're making fun of me. She accused, but she used the orb in her hand to light the torch nonetheless. It burned softly at their feet, providing a touch of warmth and light as her scorching fireball faded. Maybe. But you need to loosen up a little bit. And how do you suggest I do that? She challenged. Well, you might wanna let your hair down once in a while and be sociable, ya know. You and Tsunade are getting along swimmingly, but you haven't said so much as 2 words to Jiraiya or Orochimaru. One is a pervert, the other frightens me. She returned in a tone that hinted there would be no arguing on that, and any attempt to do so on his part would be proved futile. Can you move closer a bit? I'm cold. Naruto complied nevertheless, leaning into her until he could feel her even through his jacket. This close he could smell her, the faint scent of a desert lilac, rare and beautiful. Yet so understandably fragile. Without thinking, a hand rose and reached out to touch her hair, fingers stroking through the jaden locks, lingering at their sunset-colored tips. What? Pakura flushed. Is there something on my face? No. Do you like girls with long hair? That question caught him off guard. Long hair? Huh. Naruto thought on that one a moment, mentally flicking through the girls he knew who possessed such luscious locks. Hinata. Karen. May. He wasn't really opposed to long or short, in any case. Eventually, he shrugged. I don't dislike them. Pakura said nothing, for the longest time, twirling a strand through her fingers. Suddenly, her gaze slid to his. Would you like it if I grew mine out? I like you for who you are. Naruto frowned, not seeing the point to such a question. Even if you are a bit stiff, oof. He grunted as she shoved an elbow into his stomach. That hurt. TT Ibeo. So you can feel pain after all. A demure smile pulled at her lips. And here I was beginning to think you were invulnerable, unless scissors are involved. She chuckled softly. Naruto uttered a series of oaths so foul it made her cheeks burn before culminating in a single sentence. Shinobi don't give good haircuts. Next time, ask me to cut it. Pakura suggested. I'm no expert, but my aunt taught me a few things. Naruto bristled, thinking immediately of Tsunade's hack job, but nodded nonetheless. It wasn't as though Pakura could screw it up beyond what had already been done. I'll do that, then. At her miserable expression, he swiftly switched gears. So, you have family back home. An aunt and an uncle actually. Yes. The kunoichi warmed to the change of topic immediately, her eyes brightening with a spark of life. They're civilians, though. She's been a stylist all her life, and he, an accountant. I know it sounds silly, but they probably think me a hero for giving myself to Konoha as I have. Damn case cage. Naruto muttered beneath his breath. Treating his own shinobi like pawns on a chessboard. I should have killed him. I told you not to say such things. She fixed him with an intense stare. Besides, I would rather be, and here she did gulp, betrothed to you and have my freedom than remain a tool in Suna. You've been wonderful to me so far. Yes, I suppose that's true. Do you have any family, though? In your village? A sorrowed knot twisted at Naruto's gut. No direct family, anyway. So you were alone before that? I had someone. Oh. Her face fell. What's she like? She died, a long time ago. Ah. Naruto, I'm sorry. Pakura, Onyx met Hazel. Both turned aside, unsure of what to say. The air between them felt charged, as if they were both waiting for something to happen, though Naruto was sure it was just a product of his own overactive imagination. He tried to concentrate on small talk, but it felt as if something more than just words were passing between them. And when Pakura's hand suddenly lifted to cradle the juncture of his neck and shoulder, he jumped so badly their conversation came to a grinding halt, sparks skittering as he realized Pakura was touching him and looking at him with warmth and concern. You're injured. She murmured softly. Naruto blinked, reminded of the explosion of back in Sunagaku. A shard of debris had smacked him in the face. Filled with adrenaline, he'd thought nothing of it at the time, but the mere mention of it was enough to evoke a dull ache. One that began to fade as a familiar green glow engulfed Pakura's hand. You know how to heal. It was not a question. One learns many skills in Suna. Came her even reply. I'm no medic, but I can ease the pain. Ease the pain. Was she talking about his injury, or the burden he'd been bearing ever since Hiro had died? The knowledge that Gaara and his siblings no longer existed was a painful burden to bear. He'd never once considered that his presence in the past might obliterate the future of his friends. He couldn't care less what had happened to Sasuke, or the fact that he'd essentially done the same by wiping his former ally from existence the moment he'd taken Makoto. This was different. There was nothing to prevent him and Pakura from. Do want me to ease it? He had the distinct impression she wasn't talking about the bruise anymore. Anyone with half a brain cell could see the dual meaning of those words. Their eyes met again. This time neither looked away. Please. Perhaps it was the stress. Maybe it was the unspoken tension between the two of them. It might have even been the physical movement of her hand, now cradling his face. Whatever the case, he suddenly found his lips on hers, his hand cupping her cheek and guiding her mouth to his. If his kiss with Makoto had sparked a flame, this one ignited a raging inferno. Pakura melted into the lock of those lips with a soft sigh as though she'd been waiting for him all along. Perhaps she had. He hadn't had enough time to take stock off their kiss back in Suna. There had been so much on his mind, too much danger to even register little more than a touching of their lips. Not this time. They were soft and moist and oh so very warm, pressing against his with a tender insistence he simply couldn't bring himself to deny. It felt freeing, wonderful. All his worries and fears fell away at once, pushed to the back of his mind by the mouth of the Suna kunoichi pressing against him. He hadn't a care in the world. Pakura was of a similar mind. At first his was so slow and tender that it made her want to melt into a puddle on the cavern floor. Without warning, It became hard and hungry, making her very toes curl and her clothes threatened to fall off altogether. His hand splayed through her tightly bound hair and gently pulled the needle free, loosing the verdant green tresses messily from captivity as the other tightened on the underside of her thigh, tugging her leg up a fraction to cradle his hips. She moved with him, straddling her weight against his, knocking him to the floor, her lips never leaving his for an instant. He shifted against her, hissing in pain as his back struck the unyielding stone. Pakura, he rasped against her mouth. His voice alone was enough to evoke a soft, cracked moan in the back of her throat. She wanted him, needed him. Here was a man who didn't see her as a tool or a pawn, a piece on a chessboard to be moved forward or back or sacrificed when the need saw fit. He saw her as kunoichi. As a woman. She heard in the way he called her name, felt it as he stroked the back of her neck, saw it, in those burning black orbs, tasted it, as her tongue tangled with his. It was everywhere around them, saturating the air, or perhaps that was her bloodline warming the cold stone on their backs. There was no plea to stop as his hand traced her cheek, then her neck, no demand or anger there in those words. Unbidden, she felt a spool of warmth trickle between her legs. Oh God, he was making her wet. His hand continued on its direct path down to her sternum, where it met resistance from the zipper of her dark flak vest. He began to push it down, unintentionally sending tiny needles of desires prickling at her body in swift succession. Tiny gasps fled from her mouth. Don't stop. Don't stop. Pakura was in utter bliss. Hers were tight and aching, demanding to be touched. Her skin felt as though the flames of her scorch release danced beneath it, virtually beyond her control, writhing and arching encouragement to the finger pushing her zipper down. She could barely control herself. It took every fiber of her being not to just tear the damn thing off and take him now. Every second he delayed was torment, every instant in which his lips were not upon hers, agony. Clearly this was less than normal. Naruto seemed to realize this the moment he'd pushed the zipper far enough to expose the valley between her s. He paused, considering. For an awful instant she feared he was going to back away. Pakura was left on the ground, panting from residual want and an unfulfilled aching. In a way she was relieved that he'd stopped, but the damage had already been done. If he backed off now, her heart would be in pieces. She'd only just begun to trust him, and if he were to betray that trust now, oh. The swift tug of his wrist savagely disabused her of such a notion. Ever so slowly he pulled his hand the rest of the way down, gently tugging it free with a flick of a wrist. His hand took up residence upon one as though he owned the damn thing, kneading the flesh softly beneath his fingers. He chose that moment to take her nipple between his teeth, and nip. Not gently. As fate would have it, the fraying leash Pakura had kept on her self-control chose that moment to snap. Stop teasing me, godamnit. Not content with their new position, she grabbed him by his flak jacket and pulled him towards the floor, his hands tugging at her clothes as they went. Naruto muttered some earth jutsu beneath his breaths as they fell, simultaneously raising a wall of hardened rock to keep any unwanted eyes at bay and softening the cavern floor into a loamy bed of soil in the same instant. She saw his eyes in the dim torchlight, Sharingan dancing as she tore at his clothing and he hers. His hands were equally as explorative as they struggled to eradicate all barriers between them. He pulled the remnants of her jacket, blouse over her head and pushed her gently onto the bed, admiring the look of her torso in the dim light afforded by their torch. He took off his own shirt, smirking softly, as her eyes danced over his chest. He leaned down and pulled her pants away, revealing a pair of briefs. He chuckled softly as he saw them, their dampness. Wow, I thought you'd be wearing a thong. Horrible. She whispered, not meaning a word of it. You're hoary, ah. Her words ended in a sharp gasp as he bent to remove them with his teeth, sharp incisors defiantly plucking her last article of clothing and tossing aside. Pakura had just enough time to wonder at that mischievous glint in his eyes before he lowered his mouth past her waist, down to the thatch of dark curls just above her. Naruto. She realized too late what he was about to do, and she was powerless to prevent it. She'd never had that done to her before. The sudden lash of pleasure was utterly unbearable and her body snapped rigid with tension, unable to decide whether to push closer or pull away. Helpless little mules escaped her mouth and her hands tugged at his hair so hard it was a wonder he didn't complain. Razor blades of pleasure tore at her heart and cut her to pieces before she could bother to protest. Pakura knew not how long his tongue stabbed and swirled at that sensitive bundle of nerves, only that when he finally ceased his ministrations, she could barely bring herself to move. That's not fair. She gasped out. Those dark eyes surveyed her with thinly veiled bemusement. You're still wearing clothes, not fair. Well, why didn't you just say so? Naruto did just that, tossing his belt and trousers aside. The two shinobi were soon in Pakura straddling him, taking him in her hands as she slowly lowered herself into her lover. Pakura was by no means a virgin, but even she'd hesitated a moment before taking him in, and when she did, she wasn't disappointed, his length stretching her muscles just shy of their breaking point. A few quick thrusts began to push her closer and closer to that edge, then further, further until, that was all it took for the haze to fall over Pakura and she came with a small cry, collapsing against him. There was a silence between the two shinobi then, broken only by their short gaps of breath. Finally Pakura turned her head to look up at Naruto, disheveled hair tickling at the nape of his neck. She laid a soft kiss upon his chin and snuggled down against him, completely content. Whole, satisfied, relieved. It was as if she'd been missing a piece of herself and had finally found in him, here within this mysterious Uchiha. That was, wow. Naruto finished with a gasp, cradling her against him. With Makoto had been amazing, but Pakura was a very close second. There had been a graceful savagery to their lovemaking, not slow and drawn out, but frantic, as though the two of them couldn't bear to do without the other. You really should let me cut your hair, she murmured, brushing a hand through the ebony locks. Even after what Tsunade-sama did, it just keeps growing. Wah, you bang me once and think that gives you the right to start snipping. Naruto laughed, the words completely without rancor. I'd like that, actually. But not too short, alright. Pakura's only reply was to nuzzle up against him. Whatever you say, husband. Naruto was suddenly intensely grateful that her eyes were closed, because Pakura missed the flaming flush that stole over her face. Granted, the idea of being betrothed to her didn't seem so far-fetched now, but being called husband by such a drop-dead gorgeous woman, well, he'd never expected such a thing. You do know we aren't married yet, right? She simply purred like a contented kitten. Somehow the sound endeared her to him even more. As long as you will it. I am yours. Neither would speak of what happened on that stormy night, although some would wonder. Why were the two cuddled together the next morning? It was something of a small blessing when they finally reached the gates with most of Naruto's hair in his mind, still intact. His neck felt far less strained now, the spiky ebony curtain of his hair now merely shoulder length instead of the jagged curtain that had covered his back for most of the journey. It felt good to be able to turn his head and not get sideswiped by his own hair. Pakura really had done a wonderful job on it. Now he did not so much resemble the madman from whom he was supposed to descend as he did look similar. Still, even with the haircut, sometimes he half expected to find Madara's face staring back at him. For all intensive purposes it nearly was, with only a few minor differences. Tisking softly to himself, he turned his gaze from the evening heavens back to the earth. Wouldn't do to go around smacking into trees now, would it? Now that they'd disembarked from Manda, and with the village only a stone's throw away, he almost found himself longing for the easy ride the King of Serpents had offered. Changing the future was hard work, damn it. But the prizes, man. Think of the prizes. One more crack out of you and I'm putting ya on mute. Oh, I won't mind being quiet, considering you're about to get some. That's it. Come here. Yami retreated, slithering away with a snicker before he could pin him down. His darker half was utterly incorrigible, uncaring of the bonds of morality that had once bound them. And that was troublesome. Naruto-sama, He turned his head as Karura sidled up beside him, her violet eyes peering through the gloom to meet his with an eerie certainty. He remembered her remark that she was a censor type, but the way she looked at him told the Uchiha she'd known exactly what he was up to, lagging behind at the tail end of the group. Even Pakura was ahead of them, reluctantly making small talk with Jiraiya at the latter's behest. That was good for her. She needed to learn that the Konoha shinobi weren't her enemy. Not by any stretch. She needed to learn that this wasn't a death sentence, that there were others upon which she could rely besides him. Pakura might be special to him now, but she needed to learn to interact with others. Karura, on the other hand, seemed more curious than afraid of her new home, judging by the inquisitive look in his eyes. You need something, she faltered for a moment before pinioning him with a stare so intense he almost started. Yes. What's Konoha like? It was exactly what he needed. Why? I'm glad you asked. For all the bad memories he'd had here, there were even more good ones. Now, some might tell you Konoha's a great village, rich with history, but the truth is. With that he launched into a grand tale of the village, both past and present. Parts of which were exaggerated, of course, for the sake of the story, telling her of all the sights and sounds, the best places to train, greatest eateries. Ichiraku still stood at the top of that list quite proudly, gladly answering the occasional question offered, giving his own unbiased opinion of several clans, some of which would have started a war had they heard his words, the story finally culminating just as they reached the sentries at the gate. And that's why you never piss off an Aburame. By the end, Karura was positively glowing with amusement. Her frown was nowhere to be seen. If anything, she seemed to have forgotten it entirely in her urge not to laugh. Needless to say, Naruto noticed. What's so funny? It's nothing. The Chunin shook her head, the motion sending her short tresses twirling as they ground to a halt outside the village and awaited admittance. I just never imagined the Uchiha were like this. Powerful and arrogant, yes. But kind, too. Like you. You've actually made me feel a little bit better about leaving my home. Naruto felt something twist inside of him. Did you leave any family back home? If you mean parents, no. They died a long time ago. I've been living on my own ever since. Had a distant cousin, but we never really talked. I'll admit, I was kinda interested in Hiro-kun, but after what happened, her expression tightened only ever so slightly. I don't think my love life is about to take off anytime soon. Sorry. Damn, she'd reminded him again. Tamari. Kankuro. Gaara. By letting Hiro die, he'd effectively killed the Sunba siblings before they were born. Yet another trio to tack onto the ever-growing list of dead. Worse, he almost couldn't bring himself to care. What did that make him? A monster for changing things, or a villain for simply shrugging off the loos of life? Would it be worth it in the end? Would he change their past, only to sacrifice his own future, his very soul, in the process? Not even the Shinigami himself knew the answer to that. No, don't be. He turned, frowning as Karura spoke up again. I'm glad you saved me and everything. It's just, this, she gestured to the gates, it's all so sudden and unexpected. I feel like I'm going to wake up at any moment and find out that I've been dreaming. Good or bad dream? Good, I think. She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. Definitely good. For what it's worth, I didn't mean to take you out of your village like that. I'm actually glad you did. What? Her admittance rocked him to the core. She was grateful. Who was grateful to leave behind everything they'd ever known? I had no friends in Suna. Frankly, it was a miracle I made Chunin. My only skill is a talent I was born with. She touched a hand to the small gourd she kept bound at her waist. The ability to manipulate sand, for what it was worth. I'm not even sure if it's a bloodline. She swirled her hand for emphasis, uncorking the tiny container and calling forth the grains. Naruto watched, awestruck as they swirled around her fingers, obeying all her whims and actions. Your Kage is a kind man, right? Karura's voice fell, reduced to little more than a dry whisper. Perhaps he'll find some use for me once they let us in. Naruto felt something stir in him at the sight of that sand. Her words reminded him much of Gaara, before he'd become Kazekage. It hurt. Without thinking, he rounded on her. Don't talk like that. His own actions, the snappishness of his tone startled the both of them, his hand locking round her wrist in a vice, causing the sand to fall away from her fingers. You are not a tool. His words got a backwards glance from Pakura and a small sigh from Tsunade. You are a kunoichi, and a splendid one at that. You are a person. You have meaning, purpose. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. See, that's what I mean. Despite the painful grasp, Karura made no effort to shake herself free, if anything she seemed to value the contact. You treat me like I have value. Worth. The others, your clan, are they like you? One hand traced his, her small fingers drawing soft circles in his rough hand. Because if they are. Oh, no, he answered, mesmerized by the motion. I'm a special case. So you're just my knight in shining armor, That got a shy smile out of her. Thank you, Naruto-san. I appreciate the sentiment. Well, you're welcome, Naruto answered, releasing her hand, suddenly unsure. What the hell was that? For a moment there, he had almost. Oh, that's right. His head swung around as Karura piped up once more. I wanted to give this to you. She dipped a hand into a pouch at her side and emerged with an alabaster-colored scroll, one she pushed into his waiting hands. Naruto accepted it, frowning. A scroll. Not just any scroll, she admonished. What you have there is a summoning contract for scorpions. Suddenly the worn scroll looked like platinum in Naruto's hand. Wisely, he chose not to mention the contract he had found back in the cave. If he accepted this, but why give this to me? Wouldn't you have more use for it? It was my mother's contract. Karura faltered briefly at his confusion. She passed it on to me in her will. Don't get me wrong, I tried to summon them a few times, but they never did accept me. So, I wanted you to have it. Her hands wrung nervously together above her stomach. For everything you've done. In that instant, Naruto couldn't put his emotions into words, his mouth failed him utterly. It wasn't just the gift, rather, it was the fact that Karura seemed all too willing to part with it. It was clearly a painful reminder of her past, one she didn't want to be burdened with. So she'd given it to him. Humbled, he tucked it into his pouch. Many thanks, milady. So if you're a knight, I guess that makes me a damsel in distress, then. She continued with a flushed face. I mean, you did save my life after all, and now this. You keep praising me, and yet I've done nothing but feel sorry for myself these last 2 days. But, hearing those words, I almost want you to praise me more. She finished in a tiny plaintive voice that made him want to sweep her into his arms and kiss all those worries away until she was woe. Naruto clamped one hand over his mouth and feigned a cough, while in reality he just barely stifled a sudden trickle of blood from his nose. Where had that come from? Naruto-san. It's nothing. He muttered, looking away. Hurt flickered across Karura's visage for the span of 2 beats, but it may as well have been an eternity for all it seared into his brain. Mentally, he smacked himself silly for the slip. Gaara's mom, Gaara's mom, Gaara's mom, Gaara's mom. Sasuke's mother was one thing, considering he'd never liked the prick and found Makoto to be marvelously attractive. But this was Gaara's mother. There was nothing to stop him from taking advantage of these feelings she had for him. Worse, a small part of him wanted to. But he respected Gaara as a friend and a dear one at that, and this felt like a betrayal of his very existence. Yet on another level, would this bring the Suna siblings back into the world? Temari and Kankuro certainly. Perhaps even Gaara no. The temptation was great. Too great. It was enough to make him sigh, leaving him painfully aware that while Karura might have no idea what he was really like, Naruto did. She might think him a hero, a bloody savior and such. But he wasn't. Not by any stretch. What kind of knight let his dames die? This one had. It didn't matter if he walked differently, talked differently, had new face, a new body, even an entire new skill set. Despite all these new trappings at his core, he was still the same person. Still Uzumaki Naruto. Still a failure. I just looked different. A stray glance in a nearby puddle reminded him just how different this face really was. It still had the general shape of his visage, but that was it. No whiskers, pale skin. Dark eyes still, the hair only slightly shorter for Karura's valiant efforts to cut it, those dark bangs certainly belonging to Uchiha Madara. And now he had the Mangekyo Sharingan, which may or may not be eternal. Lovely. Thank God he still had his own voice, or he might have gone star crazy by now. And if he did, Naruto Dono, Pakura was suddenly there, jerking him back to reality with a gentle tug on his sleeve. The gates. Hua. Reining himself in, the Uchiha turned just in time to notice that they were in fact swinging open, the welcome landscape of Konohagakure stretching out beyond for miles in either direction. Evidently the sentries had seen fit to allow them passage back into the village, no questions asked. Sometimes it really was good to be known. It was even better to push forward to stride into those empty streets and remain unaccosted. A few short days ago felt so much longer now he'd been maliciously manhandled by Anbu when he'd come through here with Kushina. Now they snapped off sharp salutes to him, evidently word of his success preceded them. Home sweet home. Jiraiya sighed, spreading his arms as though to welcome a long-lost friend. Man, has it really only been 3 weeks? Feels like we just left. Orochimaru murmured, but he too seemed grateful to be home. Goo, I need a shower. Tsunade muttered, lifting an arm and sniffing. I've got sand in all the wrong places. Naoki's gonna give me hell. Forget your kid brother. Let's have a drink. Naruto laughed at that, the familiar feeling of a mission well done momentarily driving away the darkness from his mind. For a moment he felt utterly at ease, completely relaxed in the presence of the soon-to-be Sannin alongside Pakura and Karura. There was a slight awkwardness between those two, but nothing that couldn't be ironed out. Now, all he had to do was keep himself under control until he could sort out the tangled knot he called his heart and decided what his next move would be. Then the Anbu closed in. Names. An ox-faced Anbu, presumably their captain, immediately asked of Pakura and Karura. Pakura, formerly of the Sand. Karura, also formerly of the Sand. Very good. The Anbu captain nodded, his masked visage reflecting nothing, not even the pretense of satisfaction. We have already been informed of the terms of the treaty. Until space can be made available, you will share quarters with Uchiha Naruto. Is this acceptable? Pakura blinked. Karura squeaked. The reactions of Tsunade and her teammates were less tame. Why the hell is he that lucky? Kukukuku. You knew about this. I didn't know shit. Naruto snapped, Sharingan flaring in aggravation as he turned himself back to the Anbu. Look, there's no need for that. The reply was curt as it was careless. The law is clear, Uchiha Naruto. Newly instated shinobi must be kept under surveillance at all times until their probationary period is ended. There can be no exceptions. There was a silence between the two men, one in which Naruto was very tempted to fry the rule-abiding shinobi with a well-placed Amaterasu. At last he sighed, Sharingan fading to black once more. I suppose that applies to me as well. There was a murmur of confusion through the ranks, glances were exchanged and words whispered. You weren't informed, sir? The captain asked. Sir, Hokage-sama named you a Jonin as of yesterday. The ceremony is to be tomorrow. Another salute. I for one, look forward to working with you, sir. There was something about that man's tone that genuinely struck him, if it was far too respectful for a man who, by all rights, outranked him. Bordering on outright deference, even. Only one clan had shown him such blind obedience. You're an Uchiha. It was not a question. There was a moment of silence. Then, yes, sir. He didn't drop the salute. My son, Obito, just started in the academy. I speak to him of you often, and I take it you weren't told. Naruto nearly choked on his own spit. He was speaking to Obito's fodder. A man he had never met, the very same Uchiha who had fathered the most heinous villain in all of history. Willing himself not to react, he continued to maintain his facade of Uchihesque indifference. Something else the old man elected not to mention. He had assigned my squad to watch you at all times while you were within the village, sir. On what grounds? Naruto was surprised by that one. He didn't think Sarutobi cared that much for his well-being. On the grounds that he fears you might, lose your temper and burn someone, sir. Half the group Naruto included sweat doped at that lone remark. Figures. And is that edict still in effect? Nasir. As a Jonin of Konoha, you do not require Anbu supervision. But should you ever need assistance, you have but to ask for Uchiha Kageyama. Dark brows furrowed in surprise. So the old monkey had been serious after all. There were so many resources laid out before him as a Jonin. He almost didn't know what to do with them. But the news that Obito's dad was essentially in service to him, that was something to be remembered. Many thanks for your discretion. I believe the Hokage failed to mention this to me. Is there anything else of which I should be made awares? Any other ceremonies, or task of monumental importance that I need to tend to, before the sun rises, if you please. After a pause, the ox-masked Anbu continued, much to Naruto's consternation. Uchiha Makoto has also requested your presence at your earliest convenience. It's nearly midnight. She was most insistent, sir. He wasn't about to go into detail on that, not with company. I'll speak with her tomorrow then. I trust you can be discreet. Yes, sir. You won't even notice we're here. I certainly hope not. I intend to get some sleep. When he turned, the man and his squad were gone. Holy shit. He wasn't kidding. What did I say about speaking? Dunno. Something about flaying me with my own spine if opened my mouth. I walked right into that, didn't I? Yes. A muscle jumped in Naruto's jaw. Yes, you did. And the spine goes snaaaaaap. Oh wow. Okay. I'll be quiet. If you're uncomfortable, the girls can room with me until they find a place of their own. Tsunade suggested, mistaking his pleased grimace for one of actual regret. Ooh, now that I like the sound of. Wham! One dented head later and Jiraiya was sorely regretting those words. I didn't mean it like that, ya damn perv. I'll take him to the hospital. Orochimaru sighed, grabbing the now insensate shinobi by the scruff of his collar. Thankfully they're open all hours. Please do. Naruto blinked as he watched the pair depart, genuinely touched by Tsunade's earlier nonviolent gesture. It would be so easy to pawn the girls off on her for a few nights, wouldn't it? But no, he couldn't allow himself to be skittish just because Karura might or might not have feelings for him. He simply didn't have that liberty. Pakura, now that was another matter entirely, at least she knew to rein herself in. You sure about this? She asked, drawing him aside. Yeah, Naruto shrugged. What else could he do? It wasn't as though he could just turn Pakura and Karura away because he didn't feel like dealing with them. It's my fault that they're here in the first place. On a level, I feel responsible for them. A man needs to own up sometimes, ya know. Well, shit. He almost jumped when she laughed at him. Keep that attitude up and I'll end up falling for ya too. See you in the morning, kid. Naruto grunted as she slugged him the shoulder before departing with the others, muttering something about taking a long, cold shower. Try as he might, he couldn't bring himself to shove the last of those words away. Please tell me she was kidding. Right. Quote. Oh, now you've got nothing. No point stating the obvious here, partner. What the writer wants, happens. Don't go breaking the fourth wall on me. I'm in control of my own destiny here. Yeah. Keep telling yourself that. Out. Well, that solved one problem. Sorta. Hopefully. Now he was just left with two. One of whom he had no idea what to do with. Unbidden, he risked a glance at Karura, to whom he hadn't said a word since nearly dying of a nosebleed. She didn't deserve the cold shoulder, Not after all she'd been through. So, I guess you're getting the grand tour. He huffed. Right this way, then. Naruto-san. Damn, did she have to say his name like that? Stop it. He hissed at his brain, but it wasn't listening, his heart refusing to obey. He needed something, anything to distract him before he did something he'd regret. Oi, Uchiha. There. Naruto jerked away from Karura and flung himself around, swinging his head in the direction of the voice and all the while quietly thanking Kami for timely intervention. There was a roughness in the voice that reminded him of Kiba, and, yet. Not. This scent, too. It was familiar. His nose never lied. In the end, his suspicions were all but confirmed when he saw the clan markings on her face, the hound that stood proudly beside her. A slow blink was all it took for his mind to process this. Yup. She was an Inuzuka, all right. But who? There was no way that could be Hana, and the only other Inuzuka female he knew who had this scent was Sume. He almost balked, grateful to see a familiar face on one hand but on the other, just wanting to get the hell away. He didn't trust himself right now. Anger and sorrow and desire were all knotted up inside of him, and the urge to lash and hurt or take someone was rapidly becoming too much of a burden to bear. I know the Anbu just gave you the run around and you're probably, so I'll make this quick. She jerked a thumb over her shoulder. Your girl wants ta see ya. Now. Behind him, Pakura bristled. Karura was less subtle about it. Girl, she whispered. Naruto felt the beginnings of a very Uchiha-like scowl forming on his face. And you're telling me this why? 'Cause I owe the old girl a favor, alright. Sume snort. Nothing special about it. Naruto wasn't buying it. And I was kinda curious to see the man everyone's been calling the Black Death. She sniffed, eyeing him up and down. You don't look all that impressive, really. Beside her, Kuromaru barked in affirmative. Black Death. That was news to Naruto. He wasn't aware his actions in Suna had garnered him a moniker of that caliber. Was Iwa to blame for that one? Or was this yet another scheme of the Cage? He would not put it past the man to exaggerate his efforts in Suna for his own gain. Still, the Black Death. It did have a nice ring to it. Konoha already had a white fang after all. Given a couple of years, it would have the Sannin, and a yellow flash soon thereafter. Not to mention the bloody Hanabaro, now that brought a smile to his face. Yeah, the Black Death didn't sound so bad after all. Well, you've seen me. He grunted. Now, shoo, I want to get some shut-eye. She moved to block him. Why don't you make me tough guy? The huskiness of her tone proved more than enough to set his already frayed nerves on edge. She was testing him. In that instant a small smile stole over his features. Aggression had always been a part of the Inuzuka lifestyle. In all likelihood Sume was just playing with him, trying to see whether he was as good as the rumors claimed or if it was all just exaggeration. If she kept pushing on his buttons like this, she'd learn there was no exaggeration to his skills whatsoever. But this Sume wasn't the one who had been tempered by experience. She saw a challenge. Woman, he growled, a bit of Uchiha slipping into his tone, I do not have the patience for this. If anything that seemed to rile her even more. Then do something about it. Girls. Naruto's grin wasn't entirely forced this time, why don't you pull up a seat? A blink of the eye was all it took to create a shadow clone. I'm about to show you how Konoha shinobi do battle. It would be good to get some of this thrice damnable anger out of his system anyway, purge the veins and get the blood pumping, ya know. Anything was better than the tension arching his spine. Oh, Sume grunted, dropping into a crouch. So, you really wanna do this? Right here, right now. Naruto frowned, his gaze ghosting over the streets. Perhaps this wasn't the best place. Is there a training ground nearby? Sume's grin could have made the devil himself weep. As a matter of fact. So, why is Naruto-san doing this? Karura asked, indigo eyes regarding the scene laid out before them with nervous trepidation. Because he feels that he must. But aren't they allies? It's just a friendly spar, Karura. Spars in Suna were never friendly. No, no, they weren't. Pakura stifled a small sigh as she watched her would-be husband face off against the Inuzuka in the rather aptly named Training Ground 13. Karura may have been in the dark in regards to the latter's anger, but the answer was blatantly obvious to an experienced kunoichi such as her herself. She knew Naruto was feeling guilty. Not just for failing to save that young man back in Suna, but for the situation that had wrested the two of them out of their village in the first place. He was incredibly kind in that regard, but sometimes, that empathy could be a weakness. When one cared too much, they were affected by things that should not be on their minds, thoughts that would otherwise not bother them in the slightest. The Uchiha was clearly suffering because of it. She'd have to talk to him about that, but for now, she contented herself to watch him vent his aggression the only way he knew how. By fighting. Gatsuga. Fang over Fang. Naruto didn't even need the Sharingan. He'd seen the attack so many times from Kiba it was almost child's play to dodge. They always liked to lead from the front, preferring head-on attacks to the discreet tactics of the more stealthy shinobi. Sume didn't disappoint. Her and Kuromaru's first rotation drilled harmlessly past him and through the grounds, the original and the clone seeing through her frontal attack and simply sidestepping to that effect, each taking up a flanking position on either side of the field. It was Kiba's own refusal to change his tactics that had gotten him killed during the war. By the look of it, he'd inherited that from his mon. Her attacks and those of her partner were wild yet unfocused, shearing only a straight line forward, easy to dodge and even easier to counter. That was a weakness. Honestly, it was amazing she'd lived long enough to have kids. Naive. He reprimanded, leaping to meet her in midspin, boot shooting out to catch her flank, the offending sandal rudely slamming her into the dirt. Your technique is powerful, but you lack freedom of movement. Thanks for the tip. To his surprise, Sume instantly adjusted, caroming off the earth and into a nearby tree to attack at another angle. Were it not for his superior speed, she might have actually grazed him. As it were, Kuromaru shredded the clone he'd created only a few moments ago, sending its memories roaring back into his mind. Interesting. Apparently the doppelganger wasn't fast enough to dodge. Interesting to note. He'd always wondered why his shadow clone's bunchins were slower than him. Now he understood. Just because he had been expecting that attack didn't mean his clone was. It was child's play to create another one, but he would remember just how quickly the last one had been dispelled. Very interesting, indeed. Whatever you say, Mr. Observant. You're just enjoying the chance to kick so me and blow off some steam. Your words, not mine. Oof. Got you. Sanuva. The air rushed out of Naruto's lungs in a surprised grunt as Sume scored her first clean hit of the match, blunting her claws just enough to knock the wind out of him rather than leave his innards falling out of his grasp. He staggered back 2 steps, shocked, not that she'd actually been able to hit him, but that it actually hurt. So long had he become so accustomed to having Kurama blunt the pain from injuries, mend his wounds, that he'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be deprived of that resistance. And damn it, it hurt. Hey. Sume thumbed her nose. Looks like you're not so tough after all. Some Uchiha you are the. Her words ended in a strangled yelp as Naruto's hand grabbed a fistful of her hair and made her face intimate with the earth in a way no self-respecting kunoichi desired. She was up again almost instantly, writhing out of his grasp, but the way he was looking at her made her heart skip a beat. That wasn't the look of a man feeling sorry for himself. Those were the eyes of someone who was terribly angry, horribly furious, and about to kick her, to be precise. Oh, balls. Maybe I shouldn't have hit him so hard. Naruto was of a similar mind, sweeping her aside with ease when she tried another rotating fang, effortlessly redirecting her and her partner into a tree. Still no Sharingan. Only eyes of hardened charcoal regarded her, smoldering darkly in the moonlight. Something in those eyes made her heart skip a beat. They reminded her of an alpha, and a very small part of her quailed in submission. But Sume was nothing if not stubborn, and she refused to go down with a fight. She yielded to no one. Let's go, Kuromaru. Gatsuga. The Uchiha didn't bother to move as they tore toward him, he simply raised a hand and cracked his knuckles. Pain. One moment Sum hurtled forward, the next, her back greeted one of 3 logs that had been here for as long as she could remember. That didn't bother her. What bothered he was, those logs were on the side of the yard. He'd launched her with a single punch. The Uchiha's other hand was occupied with Kuromaru, his offensive hand clutching the dog's throat in a firm grip, ignoring the hound's admirable attempt to snap at the wrist. His expression downright terrified her now, as if something awful had awoken inside of him, an evil so horrifying she couldn't help but flinch aside in fear for herself and her ally. Kuro, take him. Snorting, he flung her partner at her, their bodies colliding painfully. Both shinobi and hound were up again in an instant, but the opponent they faced was not the same as then before, his devil-may-care attitude having returned with a vengeance thanks to their beating. He didn't care anymore. About Karura, Pakura, or even this damned woman who was messing with him. No one hit him like that and questioned his manhood. There was no point in questioning his every action when all it earned him was pain. No more feeling sorry for himself. Mourning over what he could have done was like trying to stop the rain from falling. It simply didn't get him anywhere, did nothing but waste time and hurt himself in the end. Time to accept their consequences and come what may. For starters, Sum was going down, and she was going down the only way he knew how. Hard. As Sum whistled past him again, he subtly reached down and tagged her on the back with a palm. Horizon. A small seal spread no larger than the edge of his thumb spread from his fingers and etched itself into the back of her flak jacket, as blurred by. Surely it wouldn't hurt to use the technique now, would it? He hadn't been able to use it back in Suna, both having not marked anything, and fear of someone seeing an Uchiha use it wouldn't do for him to be stealing his father's title now, would it? But here in the safety of the village, it was the perfect tool for smacking some sense into a stubborn Inuzuka. How ironic, he had that very woman to thank for knocking some sense into him. All right, that's enough for one night, he declared, twirling away. I don't feel like playing with you anymore. What do you mean? Sum barked out, frowning as her clawed hand came within inches of his face. We're just getting started. No, we're just wrapping up. He feinted a strike at her stomach, palming a smoke bomb in the same instant and lobbing it at the older Inuzuka. Sum's palm rose to intercept it immediately, exactly what he'd planned, and in that instant both the original flung a kunai, the deadly dagger striking the caught bomb before she could think to dispose of it. Foom. Into the smoke he and his clone blurred forwards, faster than the eye could comprehend. Pakura thought she beheld a black flash in that instant, a flicker of motion so rapid she almost didn't recognize it. Kuromaru's yelp was the only thing they heard within the plume of dust and debris, followed by a very female cry of pain. Hey! When the smoke finally cleared, both Karura and Pakura were baffled to find Sum pinned by Naruto, her canine partner likewise locked in a full Nelson by a clone. True to his word, the Uchiha had beaten the Inuzuka at her own game, trapping her in a very calm promising position to her great dismay. Pakura hissed a quiet curse under her breath. Not only had Naruto knocked Sum to the ground, but he'd straddled her, trapping both arms above her head with his hands, his body leaning over hers earth jutsu. She was a prisoner in his grasp, and everyone, even Sum herself, knew that it was over. Give up. Naruto grunted as his prey began to struggle. You've lost. TCH. Sum snorted, defiant to the last, her hazel eyes boring furiously into his. You think I'm afraid of a little foreplay? I think you're afraid of more than that. His voice was rough in her ears. When had his teeth been so damnably sharp, body pinning hers with its weight? Or perhaps it's just my imagination. A small gasp pushed itself through her teeth as he leaned forward and nipped her neck with his teeth, unintentionally biting down on the one soft spot between jaw and ear that almost every female Inuzuka possessed. Just like that, Sum turned to putty in his hands, her back arching with a soft mewl of pleasured surprise, a pleasant wave of warmth filling her face. The harder she fought, the faster she lost herself to it. Karura clamped a hand over her own face, all but steaming from embarrassment. Naruto-san. Pakuro was more shell-shocked than anything. Was Naruto really like this, or was this just an act? Give up. Naruto purred silkily, his words smooth as honey in Sum's ear. Or I make it painful. You bastard. Every word was a struggle to her now as she fought to resist the alpha towering over her. Like a lit nip would do me in. How about this then? Naruto twisted his leg in her, bringing a knee lower to rest against a particularly sensitive bundle of nerves. Sum whimpered. He'd do it too. Without a second thought. Whomever he'd been before their battle, he wasn't that man now. He had accepted something, embraced a part of himself that he hadn't before. He was an alpha now, a leader born and bred, and she realized too late she'd been a fool to challenge him. Ow. Okay. I give. Smart move. He rolled off her, leaving her body brimming with unfulfilled want and wanton need. Part of her wanted to pounce him then and there, but somehow, she managed to rein herself in. Barely. Well, shit. She grumbled. Guess the rumors weren't exaggerated after all. You kicked my. Told you I would. He could have been a great deal more polite about it, but now he was simply too tired to care. He just wanted to get back to his apartment and fall into bed. If memory served, he was going to have a long day tomorrow. Cammy, being a Jonin was already proving to be more trouble than it was worth. And, what the hell was it with all these females? It was almost enough to make a guy down boy. There it was again. He was losing himself. He needed to get out of here, find someplace safe, somewhere quiet before he screwed someone silly. What the hell? Sum coughed into the ground. What are you doing? Going to bed. Naruto gave a jaw-popping yawn as he rubbed the back of his neck. It's my win, just like I said it would be. If you want another spar, you can always try me tomorrow. No. Don't do it, partner. She scares me. Good. With that, he strutted away from the prone Inuzuka, returning his attention to the girls. Alright ladies, I think we're going to call it a night before anything else screws with my sleep schedule, he said, and simply scooped Karura up in one arm and his Pakura in the other before hurling the three of them into the village with a single chakra-enhanced bound. Everyone's shout of surprise was oddly satisfying. Within seconds they were down the way around a corner and all but out of sight. And he did just that, leaving a very confused Sum to blink at their retreating backs. The Inuzuka shivered. Damn it, he didn't even use his Sharingan. Is he that good? Kuromaru whined plaintively, pawing at his snout. Sum licked her lips. Now that's my kind of man. Kuromaru deadpanned. What? I don't have to go after him right now. I can wait. Her partner barked a negative. I'm very patient. Miles into the village, Naruto shivered as he unlocked the door. He had the succinct feeling he'd just opened the Pandora's box of the Inuzuka clan. Ah, well, nothing he couldn't handle. It wasn't as though she could tie him down and rape him, right? Sarutobi would never allow that to happen, right? Right. Okay. Now in case you forgot, I said she scares me. Me. That's saying something. Hush. Here we are, he said, flicking on the lights and ushering them inside just as the rain began to fall outside. The clouds finally unleashing their summer bounty upon the village. Home sweet home. Unlocking the door, he swung it open and ushered the duo inside. A low rumble of thunder greeted their ears as he flicked on the lights, hopefully that wasn't ominous at all. His home, if it could be called such, was relatively out of their way, housed on an open patch of land that had never been claimed for some odd reason. It's small, Karura remarked, stepping inside. I rather like it, Pakura replied, sidling up to him. He almost jumped when she kissed him on the cheek. He wasn't used to such untoward displays of affection. In that case, so do I. Karura was swift to reverse her stance, and before Naruto could stop her, she claimed the other cheek in a nervous kiss. Lucky bastard. Yami was beside himself with envy. Why do you get all the girls but I don't get any love? Shut up. I mean, if you're gonna have this many bitches, the least you'll need is a bigger house. Hate to admit it, but you've got a point there. On that much, they agreed. His apartment was relatively Spartan in style, he really didn't have anything in the way of personal belongings. It had been a gift from the Hokage. Remember chapter 3 there folks, and in the short time that he'd had the property simply hadn't occurred to him that he might want to spruce it up, or even move in with Makoto and the other Uchiha. Although he was now a part of their clan, he simply couldn't bring himself to associate with them on a day-to-day basis. Not yet. Mikto was about the only one he could stand, and that was saying something. This is where you want to live, though. Karura glanced around, inspecting the pale blue walls for dust. Don't look so starstruck. Her senior admonished. Did you expect something grandiose? I don't know. Hey, it's only temporary. Despite himself, Naruto blanched. There was a bedroom, kitchen, den, and toilet. That about summed it up. He'd have to expand the place soon, add a second floor, maybe a guest room or two. There was so much he could improve upon, it was almost mind-boggling. True to their nature, his Sharingan took the idea and ran with it. Oh, he could put a training yard out by the porch, tack on addition there, maybe even add a hot tub if he knocked down that wall. There was plenty of room to work with if he just set himself to the task. Odd. Naruto paused, his scarlet sight falling upon an oddity in his quarters. Alarm bells went off in his head almost immediately. The bedroom door was open a crack. Pakura and Karura didn't seem to notice it, they seemed to be focused on the small kitchen in the hall. Without thinking, he left them there. Another rumble of thunder reverberated through the small home, punctuated by a sharp crack of lightning from just beyond. Frowning, he reached for the handle, twisted it open. A hand snapped out, dragging him down into the darkness of his room. What the? Surprise. He was just about to fend them off when a familiar, silken voice crooned in his ear, soft lips nibbling at his neck. His body surrendered up almost before he realized it, shoulders slumping as she took control, pushing him back onto the bed as though he weighed no more than a feather. Before he could rise, she was suddenly there, straddling him, curves melding neatly with his hips, arms draping round his neck, pulling him into the most soul-searing kiss of his lifetime, one that left him aching for more. Makoto. Shish. She kissed him again, her S mashing up against his chest and evoking a brand new sort of ache. I missed you. Missed you too. The words tore themselves out of his throat, because they were true. He had missed her. His body had burned for every moment that they were apart. To be reunited with her out of the blue, when least expected it, was nothing short of pure bliss. Without thinking, his arms spread themselves across her bare back, wanton abandon, devouring her, her skin, the distance between them, everything. Makoto. She'd been waiting for him, here. In his room. That last bit explained a great deal in his mind. Too late, his pleasure-addled brain realized the chain of events about to occur. He'd left Pakura and Karura back in the hallway, and if they were decent shinobi, no doubt they would be bursting into his room any second now. Wham! Less than a second later, the door flung itself open and the lights flicked on, exposing the baffled faces of said Kunoichi. Naruto. Makoto paused in her ministrations, dark eyes regarding the newcomers contemplatively, as one would when choosing furniture. Who are these two? The clan heiress frowned tamely. Their reactions were anything but. Why is she kissing you? Who is she? Naruto-san. Naruto swallowed. Fear. True fear. The very same that made you pale, that seemed to extinguish your very essence. Scare, fright, dread, panic, heart pounding out of your chest, you begin to falter, it's hard to think clearly, hard to react in time, let alone swiftly. A split second. All of that, for a seasoned warrior, only lasts a split second, even when faced with the imminent threat of fate extending its baneful shadow over all he holds dear. So it was that Uchiha Naruto took a very deep breath to compose himself, realizing this moment had been long in coming. He'd already had his hands full with the prospect of preventing Madara's ascendance, now this. The very idea of balancing a love life with more than one woman was daunting, but in the same vein, he wasn't willing to relinquish the bonds he'd created. Makoto understood him in a way that Pakura never would, and Pakura empathized with him on the burden of being little more than a pawn in the plans of another, something someone of privilege, someone like Makoto, could never hope to understand. And Karura Kami, bless her young heart, was doing her best to cling to her sense of self just as he had done when he'd been starting out on his road to a ninja. Makoto, I'd like you to meet Pakura and Karura. They're going to be living with me for the time being. To her credit, Makoto didn't explode. She simply rose and started to dress herself, tugging on the robe she'd worn to his apartment, cinching it shut with a savage motion. Ah, Yami muttered. Where are you going? Naruto asked. Home. Her voice was positively frigid, her face the emotionless mask he'd first seen at Ichiraku all those weeks before. It's obvious you no longer have any interest in me. Everything hurt. But she wouldn't show her tears. She was an Uchiha, and she was too proud to cry in the presence of strangers. She longed to lash out and break something, but her rigid self-control would not allow even that. So she started towards the door, determined not to cry, only to start as his hand closed around her wrist. Let go of me, she whispered. I can't do that. Anger flashed in those charcoal orbs when he didn't flinch. Could he see how he'd hurt her? She nearly spat at him when he spoke again. Sit down. No. His gaze hardened. Makoto, I said sit down. Is that all you have to say? She couldn't quite suppress a sob, no longer able to keep the tears from falling across her features. No. You. Two-timing bastard. You. I said, sit down. That voice, those Sharingan, allowed no room for any argument whatsoever. It was like trying to argue with Kami. The Uchiha heiress found herself inexplicably obeying before she knew what was happening. No one is leaving this room until I say so. One look at the Mangekyo Sharingan all but trumped any argument the Kunoichi could hope to form. To challenge him, to look into those eyes over long, meant certain doom. Oddly enough, neither of the Suna shinobi had uttered so much as a word. They simply stood there, shocked yes, but not questioning him as she had done. As if they understood something she did not. What was it? What was she missing here? I care for you. The words were soft. Genuine. But I care for them, too. I'm not throwing you away, but I'm not discarding them, either. His hands held hers tightly, caging them's, preventing any momentary lapse of judgment on her part. She didn't understand. What was he saying? What did he mean by that? So, what are you saying? I'm saying that I need you here with me. He dared to release one hand, reach up to cup her cheek. Makoto let him, quietly marveling at the tenderness of his actions and words as he continued. I care about you. I'd sell my very soul to keep you here with me. Hell, I think I might even be falling for ya. Color flooded her cheeks in a rush, the back of her neck burning as those words hit home. What the hell? Surely he wasn't trying to say that he love. But I need them here with me, too. His gaze slipped to Pakura and Karura, and there was such love in those black orbs that she almost startled. They're precious to me, and no matter how much I might care for you, I can't just throw them away for your sake, to make you happy. I didn't want this. Didn't ask for it, but it's how I feel. If you really want nothing to do with me anymore, then feel free to walk on out that door. I will not stop you, I swear on my Nindo. But if any part of you cherishes what we have, take it. That's all I ask. I really don't want to lose you. Baka. A single sob of a word. The blink of an eye. Then Makoto crashed into him, knocking him backwards onto the bed and showering him with kisses. She'd made her decision. Take it or leave it. Makoto took it. Only 3 weeks since their little tryst in the training grounds, and already she couldn't bear the thought of living without him. There was more than a certain charm about him, more than the fact that he treated her like a normal person. It was somewhat stupid and selfish of her to want him all to herself, but that didn't change the fact that she cared. She wanted him by her side. And if she had to share him with others, no matter how many, it was a price she was willing to pay. Well, that actually worked. Pakura murmured. Told you. Naruto replied cheekily. Although I wasn't expecting it to be this soon. You're not opposed to this either. Makoto was in disbelief. The Suna Kunoichi shook her head, bangs tossing from side to side. I swore myself to Naruto Dono the day I left Suna. There's no other path for me. Besides, I knew from the beginning that his bonds were precious to him. I've no intention of challenging that which he holds dear. It is my honor to meet you, sister. Makoto balked. And you? Her gaze fell upon Karura. Well, Naruto-san is the reason I'm here in the first, so, her head jerked down in a clumsy bow. Pleased to meet you as well, Makoto-sama. Great. Naruto sighed, wriggling out from under the Uchiha heiress in an impossible movement. Now that's settled, I'd really like to get some rest. Hold it. Hi. Makoto's Sharingan flared. I haven't seen you for 3 weeks. She licked her lips. Did you really think I'm letting you get away that easily? Ahahaha. Can't this wait until morning? He gulped as Pakura moved to pin his right arm, and Karura his left. Traitors, the both of them. No. Makoto smiled far too sweetly. Now, lay down. Naruto's sweat dropped as she pushed him back onto the bed, all the strength sapping from his spine as the 3 girls closed in on him. Balls. He wouldn't be getting any sleep tonight. Meanwhile, deep within the bowels of the hospital bed, a bandaged body twitched. Stirred, awakening from the coma for the first time in nearly a month. He was alive. Impossibly, his body still drew breath. A lone eye blearily held onto the ceiling, staring at the white plaster with murderous intent as though he could somehow bore through the walls of his prison to find the man responsible for his wounds. His right arm may have been severed, his left eye all but destroyed by the blaze, but the eye that remained carried incredible power. Power that only he knew of, awakened by what he'd thought had been his death. The Mangekyo Sharingan. His pride had been shattered. His body broken. His woman stolen. But he still had his life. STLL had his eye. And he swore with every fiber in his being that he would make Madara's descendant pay. He did not know how, did not know when, only that he would. He would make him pay. See him suffer before he died. His very being was consumed with this desire. As his career had been taken from him, so too would he take everything out of his fellow man, Maki Himw. Ho! An unfamiliar voice cooed. You survived after all. HNNRGH. Bandaged though he might be, the man strained, his lone eye balefully turning to regard he who dared to trespass upon his brooding. The figure he saw was one of pure white, nothing more. Their body was warped and strange, horribly deformed to gaze upon. It leaned down, smiling at them. Do you want revenge? The man in white grinned. Do want to hurt the one who did this to you? The burned man nodded fervently. Good. The creature cooed. You'll be a useful pawn. Mouth muffled by bandages, Uchiha Fugaku growled a name, low and deep in his throat. He would work with this strange creature, and the man who controlled it. He would make his oppressor suffer. Uchiha. Naruto. 12 hours later. On that's why I'm so tired. Naruto relayed to Sarutobi the next morning, utterly unaware of the nemesis he'd created. Longest night of my goddamn life. One had only to look at him to know he spoke the truth. His eyes were dark and hooded, deep bags a silent testament to last night's conquest. He'd never come so close to a heart attack thanks to Makoto, and he'd nearly had Anather after convincing her to accept Pakura and Karura in the first place. He'd attended the ceremony for his new rank earlier in the day with stoic indifference, but before he'd had a chance to make his escape he'd been nabbed once more. Yet again he found himself in the Hokage's office, and when the latter had asked why he looked so tired, it had all spilled out. So, I take it they decided not to kill you. Worse. They decided to share. I don't see the problem, there. Hiruzen replied, a knowing smile tugging at his lips. You make it sound as though you had a wonderful time last night. Wonderful. Naruto shrieked. Don't you get it? I spent all night screwing 3 girls silly. Oh, sure, it was great for the first hour or 3, but it didn't stop. There was no sleep involved. None. None at all. Do you have any idea how tired I am? No. Of course you don't. Because what you do doesn't involve missions or kunoichi or anything dangerous, just piles and piles of paperwork. And I swear to God, if you were watching me again last night, I'm gonna take that crystal ball of yours and shove it so far up you'll be crapping crystal for the rest of your goddamn life. There was a silence, broken only by Naruto's labored breathing. Do you feel better now? Sarutobi asked pleasantly. The Uchiha gasped out a breath. Actually, yeah, I kinda do. Good. Impossibly, the old monkey smiled. To answer your question, no, I wasn't watching you. Though I feel your outburst is warranted. I may have placed my trust in you, but I've also laid a great burden upon your shoulders in the process, and for that, I apologize. You may be new to the village, but I say without a doubt that your loyalty is unquestionable. An enemy shinobi would have jumped at the chance to destabilize relations between us and Suna. Thanks to you, I won't have to send Tsukumo on that mission to the border after all. Mission. Naruto blinked, vaguely recalling how Hatake Tsukumo had perished, for failing to complete a mission. Did I just do what I think I did? Without trying. Yes. Still, something bothered him. Sarutobi wasn't one to apologize unless he was tossing you out of the frying pan and into the fire. Naruto smelled an assignment coming. And you're doing this because I'm sending you on your next mission. The Sandaime replied, his expression serious as the grave. I've already trusted 3 of my students with this, they departed just this morning. Recent intelligence has suggested, however, that reinforcements are required. Naruto's heart skipped a beat. Where? The land of rain. Called it. Shut up. Aim. Naruto's excitement was well concealed, although his deadpan at the very thought of being flung into an active war zone was not. I just get back from Suna, get promoted, and the first thing you do is send me to AIM. I wish it were otherwise, but you have proven yourself too capable. Hiruzen replied, steepling his fingers. Your actions in Suna garnered a great deal of attention after all. He made no mention of Pakura and Karura. It was an unspoken fact that Naruto had made a coup by securing the 2 kunoichi for Konoha. Regardless of what some might think. I've also taken your idea of investigating Kiri into consideration, but AIM is clearly the greater threat at present. If you'd like, I could earmark it for you upon your return. The idea of recruiting other clans to the village in this time of crisis is simply too good to pass up. Yes, 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 yes. He wanted to shout and skip, but he kept himself composed. So what's the mission? A rank, as matter of fact. And, Naruto pressed. Sarutobi continued. Hanzo's been making trouble along the border for too long now, and needs to be dealt with. Kill him if you can, drive him off if you can't. As I said before, I've already sent Jiraiya-kun and the others on ahead. If your team hurries, you should be able to catch up with them. Besides, he continued at the latter's groan, these 3 are quite capable, as I'm sure you'll see. They'll become Chunin in no time. Naruto's only response was to pinch the brow of his nose. Let me guess, I have no say in this whatsoever. It would have been terribly easy to outright defy the old man, but that only served his pride. And pride wouldn't get him anywhere, not in this time. There would be time to argue the issue later. So for now he quietly demurred and accepted his fate. This time. But if the old man kept sending him off on suicidal missions like this, he might have to take offense, or his own life would be forfeit. None at all. Now see for yourself. As if on cue, a soft knock sounded on the door. Ah, there they are now. Come in. 2 youths entered, closing the door behind them. I would like you to meet your team. Naruto's brow furrowed as he beheld the 2 youths assembled before him by Sarutobi. He'd fought and railed against this from the moment he'd set foot back in Konoha, but in the end cooler heads had prevailed. So here he was in the old man's office, silently ruining his new rank as Jonin. He recognized a young Nawaki Senju almost immediately. The face was a dead giveaway. So was the necklace. Supposedly cursed according to Shizune. He'd have to find a way to make him part with it, or barring that, make certain that the lad didn't get himself killed. The other boy, he didn't know. He had silver hair like Kakashi, but there was no way it was his sensei. Kakashi was still a kid in the academy if he recalled correctly. It wasn't until Sarutobi identified him as Ibiki Morino that he actually got a rise out of Naruto. Oh, this was rich. The man had scared the crap out of him when he was a kid, but now the tables were turned. Speaking of tables, where was the third student? He counted a pair of boys, not the three whelps the Hokage had promised him. Sarutobi seemed to realize it as well. Where is Uzumaki Kushina? He asked. Naruto's head snapped around so quick it might have flown clear off his neck. Somewhere in the back of his mind, his darker half cackled. Naruto only had one word for them both. No. Yes. Hiruzen answered immediately, ignoring the killing intent that flooded the room. She hasn't had a sensei since her last one died in action a year ago. As she seems quite attached to you, I deemed it fitting. She's too old. A genin is a genin. The Sandaime remained unmoved by his plight. Besides, and here he did become him closer, you're one of the few shinobi who can control her should it attempt to breach the seal again. I trust you will treat this matter with the utmost discretion. Before Naruto could even hope to answer, a voice was heard from beyond the door. Those fools weren't arm wrestling, they were playin' life-death match, Ibane. Hi, one of the Anbu answered. Go right on in. Instead of opening slowly, the door flung itself open with a resounding crash, admitting a blur of orange and black. Uzumaki Kushina, reporting for duty ga. Naruto. She skidded to a grinding halt, eyes wide at the sight of him. When did you get back from your mission? Yo. Just last night. The Uchiha colored at the sight of the girl's enthusiasm. Beautiful as ever, her long lustrous red hair trailing after her loud entrance, Hishiate strapped proudly to her forehead. And was she wearing orange? It was almost enough to draw a smile to his face, the sight of his favorite color stirring up fond memories deep within his heart. Still, the scowl refused to depart from his face. Sarutobi's next words only made it deepen. Meet your new sensei, Kushina. Her grin was practically ear-splitting, and bloody adorable, he had to admit. Sensei. Is there a problem? Naruto bit back a groan, resisting the urge to fawn over that adorable face. Kami preserve him, this was going to be hard. Talk about stating the obvious. Oh my gosh, no. Breath rushed out of him as she glommed him, her slender arms squeezing his ribs with enough force to nearly fracture bone. Such strength. What was it with redheads and that? Gasping for air, he loosely patted the kunoichi on the back, quietly grimacing at the affection in her eyes. The girl who might one day give to a Naruto in the future was now looking at him like a lost little puppy. He was certain that had she a tail, it would be wagging. And he was going to take her, unprepared, into a war zone. Yeah, even I agree that this is a bad idea. That decided it. I'm afraid I can't do this. Naruto said suddenly, worming out of her hold. He did his best to ignore the flash of hurt that tore itself across Kushina's visage. You can't give me 3 untested teenagers, and expect me to go off into the middle of a war zone. I need to know what they're capable of, at the very least. Barring an outright examination, I can't accept them as they are now. They'll just get themselves killed. If I'm to take on these kids, I need to see what they can do. I need to know that they can work as a team. And what do you propose, exactly? Sarutobi asked. In contrast, Naruto's grin, while positively beatific, sent shivers through his soon-to-be students. Nawaki gulped. Ibiki remained stoically silent. In the end, only a certain redhead blanched at his words. How does a bell test strike you? The genin blinked, baffled. Interesting. Hiruzen chuckled, having fond memories of such an experience. Are you certain they'll survive? Possibly. So be it then. Glad ya saw it my way, Gigi. Kushina took one look at her sensei to be and promptly gulped. Had she known him, she would have realized Naruto was taking a page from a certain copycat's handbook. This test of which he spoke. It would be hell in its purest form, and stretch her newfound feelings for the man to their limit and in time, work only to deepen them. But more than that, it would serve as a painful reminder of just how far she needed to come in order to reach her dream, and in surviving this, she would take one more step on the road to greatness. Of course she knew none of these things, only that Naruto-sensei had something prepared for them. Naruto would never deliberately try to kill her. She knew that. But, even then, she couldn't quite shake the terrible sensation of dread she felt when she saw that smile. I've got a bad feeling about this, Tte Bane.